Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the absolute audacity of the 1971 hijacking of Flight 305. But listen, we're not going to treat this like your run-of-the-mill true crime story. No way. We're looking at the legend of Dan Cooper as a brilliant, incredibly tense aerodynamic puzzle. Because let's be real, surviving a jump from a commercial jet in the dead of night, right in the middle of a rainstorm, that takes way more than just guts. It takes math. It takes physics, and it requires a seriously deep, highly specialized understanding of aviation mechanics.
So let's dive into this. To wrap our heads around how a guy wearing a business suit, a clip-on tie, and loafers just stepped out of a jetliner and vanished, we really need to look at the extreme physics at play here. Commercial airliners are literally designed to keep you inside. I mean, the pressure, the sheer speed, the freezing temperatures at cruising altitude. It's immediately lethal out there. So could you actually survive a jump? Well, Cooper didn't hijack just any random plane, and he definitely didn't jump under normal conditions. He basically engineered his very own escape hatch. The absolute linchpin of this whole heist was his choice of machine. He specifically booked a ticket on a Boeing 727-100. And why that plane? One reason: the ventral air stair. This was a set of stairs built right into the rear fuselage, directly under the tail. Now, originally, this was totally innocent. It was just there so passengers could get on and off at smaller regional airports that didn't have those massive rolling ground stairs. But for a hijacker looking to bail out mid-flight, it was the ultimate loophole. What's wild is how perfectly the 727 was suited for this specific crime. Seriously, it was practically the only civilian plane in the sky that could pull this off. Think about it. If you jump out the side door of a normal airliner, the slipstream is going to slam you right into the horizontal stabilizers at the back. Game over. But the ventral air stair let a jumper exit straight out the back, right down the middle, safely clearing the rest of the plane. And then there's the engines. The 727 has 3 rear-mounted engines placed way up high on a T-tail structure. That meant the crazy hot, high-velocity jet exhaust was kept safely above the exit path. You wouldn't be instantly incinerated. Plus, it had this unique wing design, allowing it to fly super slow at low altitudes without just dropping out of the sky. It was, quite literally, the perfect getaway machine. But here's where it gets crazy. Cooper didn't just know the plane had a backdoor. He knew exactly how it behaved under pressure. While they were still on the ground in Seattle, he actually demanded they take off with those back stairs already lowered. The airline's executives pushed back, saying it was impossible and totally unsafe. But Cooper just coolly corrected them, pointing out that the 727 was aerodynamically perfectly capable of a safe takeoff with the stairs down. This completely floored the flight crew. Why? Because this was a highly classified clandestine capability. You wouldn't find this in any civilian manual. It was a trick used mostly by CIA front airlines, like Air America, when dropping agents behind enemy lines in Vietnam. So this demand proved Cooper had some seriously specialized, maybe even classified knowledge of the plane's mechanical limits. And this is the biggest takeaway right here. Dan Cooper wasn't just winging it. Like First Officer Bill Rodachak pointed out, the guy had highly specific knowledge of flying. He didn't just casually ask them to fly low and slow. He laid down a strictly calculated set of flight parameters, essentially forcing the crew to operate at the absolute ragged edge of the 727's low-speed capabilities. He was literally reprogramming a commercial airliner into a tactical parachute jump platform. Let's look at exactly how he engineered this survivable environment. He manipulated 4 very specific things. First up, maximum altitude, 10,000 feet. Any higher and you pass out from lack of oxygen. But more importantly, jets have to pressurize their cabins at higher altitudes. And if the cabin is pressurized, you literally cannot push the doors open against that physical force. 10,000 feet neatly solved both problems. Second, he capped their speed at 150 to 170 knots. This kept the dynamic pressure, the physical wall of wind, from tearing him apart the second he stepped outside. Third, he made them leave the landing gear down. Those wheels act like massive air brakes, creating huge drag to force the plane to fly slow while keeping engine thrust up. But the absolute masterstroke is this number right here, 15 degrees. Cooper demanded the wing flaps be set to exactly 15 degrees. That is a stunning display of aerodynamic knowledge. You see, at the creeping speeds he demanded, a normal commercial jet would lose lift and enter a deadly aerodynamic stall. It would just fall out of the sky. But a 15-degree flap setting, that was completely unique to the 727. It increased the wing's lift just enough to keep that massive airliner stable at a mere 170 knots. That is not a lucky guess. That is the mind of an aeronautical engineer, or maybe a highly trained tactical pilot. So, configuring the plane this dirty, with the gear down and flaps out, created massive aerodynamic drag. Imagine trying to sprint through waist-deep water. That's basically what the plane was doing through the air. The engines had to work overtime, screaming just to keep them moving, which meant they were burning through fuel incredibly fast. Because of that terrible fuel economy, Cooper accepted that his original plan of flying all the way to Mexico City was out, so he had them fly south along the Victor 23 airway toward Reno instead. This specific, low-altitude route followed Interstate 5, which gave him visual landmarks on the ground and safely kept them away from the freezing, jagged peaks of the Cascade Mountains to the east.
All right, so the stage is totally set. Let's look at how this timeline actually played out. At 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 leaves Seattle into this dark, nasty, stormy sky. 2 Air Force fighter jets actually scrambled to tail them, but get this. Because the 727 is flying so ridiculously slow, those supersonic military jets can barely stay behind it. They're forced to fly continuous S patterns back and forth just so they don't accidentally zoom right past the airliner in the pitch-black clouds. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, the tension is through the roof. Cooper is totally alone in the back. At 8 p.m., a warning light pops on in the cockpit telling the pilots the aft stairs are down. Then, at 8:12, boom, the crew feels a sharp, sudden drop in cabin pressure. It was so intense that it actually popped the co-pilot's ear plug right out. The outside atmosphere had fully breached the cabin.
And then, just 1 minute later, at exactly 8:13 p.m., the pilots feel something wild. The whole aircraft suddenly bucks upward in the tail section. This longitudinal pitch is so sharp that the pilot actually has to manually fight the controls and push the nose down just to keep them flying level. Later on, the military ran flight tests and proved that this specific pitch event is the exact aerodynamic signature of a 200-pound weight suddenly dropping off those rear stairs. The second his weight was gone, the heavy metal stairs instantly sprang upward, shifting the center of gravity and pitching the tail. Right then, at 8:13 p.m., Dan Cooper had officially exited the aircraft.
Now, while all the math inside the cabin was calculated to absolute perfection, the reality waiting for him outside was incredibly hostile. Down on the ground in Washington, it was 44 degrees and raining. But up there, at his jump altitude of 10,000 feet, the ambient temperature was a bone-chilling -7 degrees Fahrenheit. And when you factor in leaping into a 170-mile-per-hour slipstream, the wind chill plummets to below -30 degrees. This guy took a plunging leap into a freezing, hurricane-force, pitch-black vortex, all while dressed for a mid-level corporate board meeting.
Which brings us to the biggest paradox of this whole incredible heist. For all his brilliant aeronautical knowledge of the 727, his actual survival choices once it was time to jump were bafflingly amateurish. Out of the 4 parachutes they gave him, he picked the older, technically inferior, unsteerable, military-issue round canopy. You have absolutely zero lateral control with that thing, meaning his landing spot was entirely at the mercy of the violent storm winds. And it gets worse. For his backup chute, he grabbed an instructional dummy training parachute that had accidentally been mixed into the batch. The canopy was literally sewn shut. Any skilled skydiver would have meticulously checked their gear, but Cooper jumped into the dark having completely eliminated his only reserve safety margin. He didn't even bring a helmet.
And this brutal reality check is exactly why the FBI eventually shifted their entire profile of the hijacker. Like Special Agent Larry Carr pointed out, despite Cooper's absolute mastery of the 727's engineering and flight envelope, he completely lacked the crucial skydiving skills and survival gear for what he was actually attempting. He was an aviation mastermind, sure, maybe an aircraft mechanic or a cargo loader, but a paratrooper? No way. He stepped into a 172-mile-per-hour wall of freezing, turbulent air wearing slip-on loafers. It's almost unbelievable.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Dan Cooper unquestionably pulled off an unparalleled engineering heist. He played a massive commercial airliner like an instrument, manipulating its drag, its lift coefficients, and even its classified mechanical vulnerabilities to create the only airborne escape hatch in history. But did his flawless deconstruction of the flight envelope actually let him pull off the ultimate getaway? Or did the unforgiving laws of physics, a faulty parachute, and a freezing Washington sky ultimately claim the final victory? Let us know what you think. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep questioning the impossible.